Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into how those top CEOs, how they build, those really exceptional organizations. It's like, how do they get it right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're going deep on how these top performers really make it happen.
Yeah.
Not just like the surface stuff.
Right. This isn't some generic advice. This is the real deal, those core strategies. And, it's fascinating. We dug into a ton of material, like a lot of research. And we found 7 key lean strategies that just stand out, right? Companies that really nail these strategies, they see a huge difference. Think like a 50% drop in lead times, 30% jump in capacity. These are those game-changing results.
Absolutely. This is about more than just tips and tricks, right? It's
Yeah.
about those fundamental principles that underpin, world-class performance.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't about, just being good. It's about being exceptional. And in this deep dive, we're going to break it all down. We're going to unpack these 7 critical approaches. 1, going to the Gemba, seeing where the real work actually happens. 2, the relentless pursuit of waste elimination. 3, mapping the value stream, really focusing on what matters to the customer, because at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. 4, igniting continuous improvement with Kaizen. 5, putting people first. Your people are your most valuable asset, period. 6, leading the lean way, the role of the CEO. They're not just a figurehead, they're a steward. And 7, keeping score the lean way, metrics that actually drive value.
That's the lineup, those core principles driving these top organizations.
Exactly. And look, we're not just going to throw concepts at you. We want to give you actionable stuff, right? Real world insights that you can actually use. So whether you're leading a team, whether you're just trying to get your own work flowing better, or you're just fascinated by, what makes these great companies tick, you're in the right place.
Let's kick things off with that first strategy, going to the Gemba.
Okay, so Gemba. It sounds a little fancy, maybe even a little mysterious, but honestly, it's a very grounded idea. It's just, the actual place where the work gets done. Think of software developers, their workspace, or, a nurse's station, or the shop floor of a manufacturing plant, wherever the real value creation happens. And, what really separates lean CEOs, they don't just sit in their offices looking at reports. They make it a priority to go to the Gemba, to see things firsthand.
It's about really getting a feel for the process,
Uh-huh.
right? And what often surfaces, when leaders go to the Gemba, is this really striking gap between what those reports say, that neat and tidy picture, and the reality the workers are facing every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the reports might tell you one story, but the Gemba tells you the real story. And, this direct engagement, it has some really important benefits for you even, right? First of all, those leaders, they get a much deeper understanding of the actual processes, the challenges, the little things that employees have to navigate. Secondly, when you're present in the Gemba, well, you start to see things, inefficiencies, waste that just doesn't show up in those spreadsheets. But when you're there, it's obvious, a machine sitting idle, or you see materials being moved around unnecessarily. And maybe the biggest benefit is this: better communication, real trust. When leaders take the time to be there, talk to the employees where they're working, it shows respect. And that opens up a real dialogue, a real conversation.
So, flip side of the coin, right? What happens when those leaders don't prioritize the Gemba?
That's a recipe for trouble, right? You run the risk of decisions being made on bad information, incomplete information. So you come up with strategies that are just off base. You also miss out on those opportunities to improve. If you don't see the bottlenecks, if you don't see the wasted effort, you can't address it. And then, of course, there's the human side of things, the people doing the work. When they feel like their leaders aren't seeing their reality, their insights, it leads to disengagement. Productivity takes a hit. It's not good.
It really begs the question for you, right? How do those successful companies, especially those here in the U.S., how do they implement this Gemba approach? How do they make it real?
We've seen a few really effective methods that just keep coming up, One of them is management by wandering around. But, it's not just wandering around aimlessly. It's about having a purpose. You're going there to observe, to ask insightful questions, to really see the work from the employee's perspective. Another approach that we've seen is encouraging leaders at all levels to spend time in the Gemba, not just to see what's going on, but to actually help their teams, to work together to find those areas where things can be better. And a really important one is Gemba walks as a problem-solving tool. When there's a problem, go to the Gemba, see it firsthand, understand the root cause. Where it's actually happening.
So thinking about those companies that maybe struggle, where do they miss the mark? What are some of those common missteps that you might see from competitors who just aren't getting this Gemba thing?
Well, you often see, too much reliance on those reports, those lagging indicators. Just looking at the number, you miss those early signs, those little things that are happening on the front lines. And, sometimes you see strategic decisions being made in a bubble, completely disconnected from what's actually happening day to day. It leads to initiatives that just don't work in the real world. And then, of course, the most damaging thing, a disconnect between management and the workers, right? Employees feel like they're not heard, their ideas don't matter. That kills productivity. It kills innovation. It's a recipe for disaster.
So for you listening, how can you take this Gemba principle and actually apply it in your own work, your own environment?
It's really about making it a habit, Make regular focused visits to your Gemba. Don't just, pop in and pop out. Really spend the time. Engage with the people who are actually doing the work. Ask those good open-ended questions. Really listen. Really listen to their insights. For instance, lead a sales team. Spend some time observing their customer interactions, education, spend time in the classroom, get in there. This firsthand understanding, it's invaluable. It helps you make better decisions, and it builds a culture where everyone's working together to make things better.
Let's move on to that second key lean strategy.
Yeah.
That relentless pursuit of waste elimination.
All right, so now we're talking about a core obsession in the lean world, right? This idea of waste. Muda, anything that doesn't add value for the customer, anything that's not adding value, from their point of view, it's out. Lean organizations are laser focused on finding and eliminating this waste, all forms of it. It could be too much inventory, tying up all your money. It could be unnecessary steps that slow everything down. It could be defects, things that need to be redone, costing time and resources. It could even be people just waiting around for the next stage.
Stripping away all the things that aren't contributing directly to what the customer actually wants in the most efficient way possible.
Absolutely. And, the payoff for all this focus on getting rid of waste, it's huge. You see efficiency go up, productivity shoots up, processes get streamlined, costs go down because you're cutting out all that unnecessary spending. And here's a big one. Quality gets better because when you get rid of waste, you're also often getting rid of the root cause of those errors, those defects.
So, on the flip side, what happens when you don't prioritize this? What are the consequences, if you're not focusing on waste elimination?
If you're not actively working to eliminate waste, it's going to cost you, right? Your operating costs go up, profitability takes a hit. Inefficient processes, they're like a leak in your boat, just constantly draining resources. Lead times get longer, customers get frustrated, nobody's happy, and fundamentally, you're wasting valuable resources, right? Time, materials, people's effort, all that could be used to create real value that the customer actually sees and appreciates.
So, thinking about some of the companies out there doing this well, what are some of those proven strategies that they use? How do U.S. companies, really tackle this waste issue? What are they doing?
There are a few really powerful approaches. One is these Kaizen events. These are like focused workshops, really intense, designed to quickly reduce waste in a specific area, a process, like a targeted burst of improvement. Art Byrne at Wiremold, he used these events to dramatically reduce staffing needs for certain operations, without impacting output. Another really important strategy is value stream mapping. It's a visual tool, and we'll dive deeper into that a little later, but it helps you see where the waste is across the entire process of creating and delivering a product or service. And then a lot of companies, they train their employees, everyone, to recognize those 7 wastes, transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. They build a culture where everyone is looking for waste, thinking about how to eliminate it.
So, where do the competitors stumble? What are some of those mistakes that you see companies making? Companies that just aren't making waste elimination a core part of how they operate.
Well, sometimes you see companies that just accept inefficiency, It's just how we've always done things, and no one questions it. They don't challenge the process. And sometimes there's this focus on just, churning stuff out, maximizing output without even thinking about the hidden costs of all the waste. And a really big mistake is they don't involve their employees. Those employees, they're the ones on the front lines. They see the waste every day, but they don't get a say in solving it.
So how can you, the listener, how can you take this idea, this principle of relentless waste elimination and make it real in what you do? Where do you even begin?
The first thing is just start paying attention. Develop an awareness of waste. Where is it happening in your work, in your processes? Train your people, your teams, to recognize those different types of waste. And then use the tools. Things like value stream mapping, Kaizen events, do them regularly to systematically attack that waste. For instance, if you're in a service industry, Think about all the steps involved in serving your customer and look for handoffs, delays, those kinds of things. Manufacturing, look at how you move materials, where you store them. It's about looking for waste everywhere, constantly. And when you do that, you streamline things, you reduce costs, and you create more value for your customer.
It's a continuous process of improvement,
Right.
right? And that really leads into our third lean strategy, mapping the value stream.
Absolutely. Value stream mapping, it takes a bigger picture view, right? It's not just about individual tasks. It's about understanding all the steps involved in getting that product or service to the customer, from design to production to delivery. Lean thinking is about looking at the whole thing, breaking down those silos that we all get stuck in, and maximizing the value from the customer's perspective. Imagine you're tracing the path of a customer order from that first click all the way to when it arrives on their doorstep. That's value stream mapping.
It helps to see, how those individual steps, they might seem really efficient on their own, but when you look at the whole flow, they might actually be contributing to inefficiency, right?
Right, exactly. And, seeing that big picture, it's really beneficial. First, you get this clear understanding of how everything connects. You see how each little thing impacts the customer experience. Second, it shows you those bottlenecks, those inefficiencies, and those can span across several departments. It's stuff you wouldn't see if you just focused on one department at a time. And then it forces those teams to work together, to collaborate, to optimize the whole process, not just their little part of it.
So imagine you're not using value stream mapping, right?
Yeah.
What are you missing out on? What are some of the potential drawbacks there?
Without this big picture view, you get stuck in silos. Different departments working in their own little worlds, not really talking to each other. Each team might be doing a great job on their own, but the whole process suffers. And then it becomes really hard to find and fix those problems that, go across departments. And the focus shifts away from what really matters, giving that customer the best possible value. It's like, we're all working hard, but are we working smart?
Okay, so what about those companies that are doing this well? How do U.S. companies really use value stream mapping effectively? What does that look like?
So a common approach is you get teams from different departments, cross-functional teams, and you have them work together to create these visual maps. They map out the current process, how things are working right now, and then they map out the ideal future state, right, with less waste, better flow. And they use these symbols to represent the different steps, the flow of materials, information, so everyone's speaking the same visual language. Some companies, they even go as far as, organizing their resources and how they report around these key value streams. And those gaps, those opportunities that they find during this mapping process, well, that's where the real improvement projects come from. That's what fuels those Kaizen events.
So what about the companies that, aren't quite there yet? Where do you see those competitors stumbling when it comes to value stream mapping? What are they missing?
Well, one mistake we see a lot is, making changes in one area without thinking about how those changes will ripple through the whole process. You end up creating new bottlenecks or making other areas less efficient. Another common one is they measure success based on what each department is doing instead of looking at the overall value for the customer. So you might be hitting your individual targets, but the customer experience is suffering. And then without this value stream mapping, you don't have that shared understanding across the organization. You don't really know how you're creating value for your customer. So how do you even know what to improve?
So for you, the listener, how can you start using value stream mapping? How do you, take this concept and make it real in your own work?
Start by figuring out what your key value streams are, right? What are those core processes that deliver your main products or services? Then get teams together, people from different departments, and work together to map out the whole process, the whole thing. Visually, where are the bottlenecks? Where's the waste? Where are things slumming down? And always think about it from the customer's point of view. Use these maps to guide your improvement efforts. Make it about eliminating waste and making that flow of value as smooth as possible. If you're an online retailer, for example, you could map the whole journey from that moment a customer clicks buy to the moment that package arrives on their porch. Or if you're in healthcare, map the patient experience from their first appointment to the last follow-up.
Now, moving on to our fourth lean strategy, igniting continuous improvement with Kaizen.
Okay, so Kaizen. Literally, it means good change or improvement, This is like fundamental to lean thinking. It's not about these massive disruptive changes. It's about everyone from the front line to the CEO having this mindset where they're always looking for small improvements to make every day. It's that constant push to be a little bit better.
It was a powerful, right? Because those small changes over time, they add up. They really add up to some really substantial progress.
Exactly. Kaizen, it's not just about making things better, it's about creating a culture. And there are huge benefits for you, for your organization. You get more engaged employees, they feel empowered, they know their ideas matter. It's a continuous cycle of improvement that becomes part of who you are as a company. And because you're catching problems early on, at the source, you prevent those small issues from blowing up into big problems.
So, think about the flip side, right?
Yeah.
What happens when that continuous improvement philosophy, when it's just not there? What are the consequences of not really embracing Kaizen?
Well, without Kaizen, things stagnate. You get stuck in a rut, you miss out on all those opportunities to get better, and then you end up relying too much on, the top-down approach. Changes are dictated from above, and you miss out on all those great ideas from the people who are actually doing the work. And ultimately, your employees, they don't feel like they're part of the solution, they don't feel empowered, and they stop caring.
So how about the companies that are doing this right? What are some of the ways, the practical ways, that U.S. companies are using Kaizen to really make a difference?
We've seen a few really effective strategies. First, those Kaizen events we talked about, right? They're great for targeted, rapid improvements. But it's also about fostering that culture where everyone feels like they can contribute, encourage those individual and small group Kaizen initiatives. Franciscan St. Francis Health, they trained all their staff on lean principles, empowered them to make those small improvements, and it made a huge difference. And then it's crucial to share those successes, to celebrate them, to show everyone how those small improvements are adding up.
And what about those that aren't quite there yet? Where are the competitors stumbling when it comes to Kaizen? What are some of the common mistakes?
One big one is, they rely too much on these big projects, these sweeping changes, and they forget about those small, everyday improvements. They miss the power of that consistent, drip, drip, drip of improvement. Another one is they don't train their employees. They don't give them the tools they need to actually solve problems. And then, sometimes you see companies that just ignore suggestions from the employees. That's a killer. It discourages people from even trying.
So for you listening, how can you bring that Kaizen spirit to your team, your organization? Where do you even start with that?
Start by creating that culture where everyone feels like they can contribute. Give them the training, the tools they need, simple problem-solving methods. Make it easy for people to share their ideas. And when someone comes up with something good, celebrate it. Recognize their contribution. Make it visible. A retail store, for example, they could set up a simple suggestion box and empower employees to try out their ideas for improving the store layout or customer service. A call center could give agents the training to streamline their call handling procedures. It's about empowering people at all levels.
All right, let's talk about our fifth strategy, putting people first.
Absolutely. This is where, the human side of lean really comes in. Lean CEOs, they get it. They know that their employees are not just cogs in a machine. They're the most valuable asset they have. And if you want to make lean work, you have to build a culture of trust, respect, and empowerment.
Because at the end of the day, it's those people on the front lines. They're the ones with the most knowledge about the work, the challenges, and they're the ones who are closest to the customer.
Exactly. When you put your people first, it pays off big time. Employees are more engaged, more motivated, they're invested in their work, you get more innovation, better problem solving, because you're tapping into the collective knowledge of your people. And you see lower turnover. People want to stay because they feel valued, they feel respected.
So flip it around, right? What happens when you don't prioritize your people? What are those consequences that you see when that's not happening?
Well, if you ignore your employees, if you treat them like, they're replaceable, it backfires. They become disengaged, unmotivated, productivity goes down, quality goes down, even customer service suffers. You're essentially wasting talent. All those good ideas, that potential for innovation, it's just sitting there untapped. And people will leave, right? Turnover goes up, you spend more time and money on recruiting. It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, so what about the companies that are doing this well? How are they showing that genuine commitment to their people? What are those strategies, especially here in the U.S., those companies that are really walking the walk?
Well, one thing we see a lot is, they build a culture of respect, of trust. Employees know their concerns will be heard. They're taken seriously. Bob Chapman at Barry Wehmiller, he built his entire company around that idea, prioritizing his employees' well-being, and they've been incredibly successful. Another big thing is they give employees real power, empowering them to make decisions, to solve problems in their own areas. They feel ownership over their work. And then, of course, invest in training, development, show them that you're invested in their growth, their culture.
What about the companies that aren't getting this right? What are some of those common mistakes that you see from competitors, those that just aren't prioritizing their people?
It's sad, but you still see some companies treating their employees like, they're expendable. That creates resentment, a lack of commitment. And sometimes they make these top-down changes without getting any input from the people who will actually be affected. People resist that. It doesn't solve the real problems. And then the worst thing is creating that environment of fear where making a mistake is a big deal. People are afraid to try new things, afraid to speak up. You kill innovation before it even starts.
So for our listeners, how can they take this idea of putting people first and put it into practice?
Yeah.
How do you really, make this shift?
It starts with a mindset shift. You have to make a conscious decision. Your employees are a priority. You care about their well-being, their ideas. Create a culture where people feel comfortable speaking their minds, sharing their concerns. Give them the power, the resources they need to do their jobs well and solve problems. And invest in them. Give them opportunities to learn, to grow within the company. A good example is, like in software development, you create this environment of psychological safety. Developers feel comfortable taking risks, trying new things, and even making mistakes because they know they won't be punished. It's about building that trust, that feeling of support.
Now let's shift our focus to the role of leadership. Our sixth lean strategy, leading the lean way. This is about the CEO stepping up as a steward.
Yeah, this is so important. Lean isn't just another project, it's a transformation. And it needs strong leadership, especially from the CEO. They're not just there to sign off on it. They're the ones driving it, guiding it, keeping that vision alive. They're the ones fostering that culture of discipline and commitment.
Yeah, it's about them being, fully invested. Not just giving it lip service, but really being involved, being present, leading by example.
Right, exactly. It's not enough to just say, hey, we're doing lean now. You have to live it. And when you have that kind of leadership, it's huge. It creates a clear vision. Everyone knows where you're going, why you're doing this. It shows commitment that this isn't just a flavor of the month. It's here to stay. And it keeps everyone on the same page, working together, aligned around those core lean principles.
And what happens when you don't have that? What happens when that strong lean leadership, when it's missing? What are those consequences?
Well, lean becomes a fad. It's a surface level thing. You get some initial excitement and then it fizzles out. You see departments working against each other, conflicting priorities, and there's this resistance to change, right? People go back to the old ways of doing things because it's comfortable.
So, let's talk about the companies getting this right.
Yeah.
What are those successful U.S. companies doing? How are they really practicing lean leadership?
Well, you see CEOs really embracing lean, not just talking about it, but actively participating. They're doing Gemba walks. They're involved in Kaizen events. Like Art Byrne, right? At Wiremold, he was right there in the trenches leading those early Kaizen sessions. And it's about having a plan, a long-term vision, a strategic roadmap. Lean isn't a quick fix. It's a journey. And they build that culture of discipline. It's not about being rigid. It's about being consistent, focusing on those core principles day in and day out.
And on the other hand, where do you see those competitors falling short? What are some of those common mistakes that happen when that lean leadership isn't there?
Sometimes they delegate lean to, middle management, and then they wash their hands of it. They figure, okay, it's being handled. But without that top-level support, that guidance, it loses momentum. Another mistake is, they get too focused on those short-term wins, those financial numbers. They lose sight of the long game. And then, sometimes there's just this unwillingness to really challenge the old ways of doing things, those old systems, those metrics, even if they conflict with lean. They can't let go of the past.
So, for you, the listener, for those of you in leadership roles, how can you lead the lean way? How do you become that kind of leader?
You have to own it. You have to be the champion, the driving force. Paint that picture of what lean can do for your organization. Get people excited about it. And don't just talk about it, Get involved. Go to the Gemba. Be part of those Kaizen events. Look at those metrics. Show them that you're committed. It's a long game. Be patient, persistent, and lead by example.
All right. Let's wrap up with our final lean strategy, which brings us to measurement. Keeping score the lean way. Metrics that drive value.
Exactly. Lean organizations, they know this. What you measure is what you get. So they focus on those metrics that really matter. Customer satisfaction, how smoothly things are flowing, quality, waste reduction. They get that those traditional financial metrics, well, they don't always tell the whole story.
Because, as you know, traditional financial metrics, they often look backwards. They're
Mhm.
lagging indicators. They tell you what's already happened. They don't give you that real-time insight into how things are running and where the problems might be lurking.
Right, exactly. And using lean metrics, it has a lot of advantages. They're like, early warning systems.
Right.
They show you those potential problems before they blow up. They align everything with what's important, delivering value to the customer, being efficient. And because they're simpler, more visual, they're easier for everyone to understand. Everyone can see how their work contributes to the bigger picture.
So imagine you're relying only on those traditional financial metrics, right, in a lean environment.
Hmm.
What are you missing? What are some of those potential downsides there?
Well, you're always looking in the rearview mirror. You don't see the problems until they've already happened. And sometimes you end up doing things that make the numbers look good in the short term, but actually hurt you in the long run. Like pushing for those big production batches. You might save a little money per unit, but you end up with tons of inventory sitting around, lead times go up, and the customer suffers. And, for the people on the front lines, those financial reports, they're just numbers. They don't see how their work connects to it.
Okay, so how about those companies that are doing this right? How are U.S. companies using lean metrics effectively? What are some of those strategies they're using?
Well, they keep things simple. They focus on metrics that really matter, like on-time delivery, defect rates, how efficiently their equipment is running, how quickly their inventory is turning over. Think back to Art Byrne at Wiremold, right? He focused on those simple operational metrics,
Yeah.
and they make it visual. They use charts, graphs, dashboards, so everyone can see how they're doing. And some companies, they even go a step further, they use what's called lean accounting. It's all about tracking the flow of value, not just costs. Leaders like Oris Fume, they've been pushing that idea.
So, what about those companies that aren't quite there yet? What are some of those common mistakes they're making with their metrics?
They overcomplicate things. They drown themselves in reports that don't really tell them anything useful. They use metrics to point fingers, to blame people instead of finding ways to improve. That creates a culture of fear where people are afraid to admit mistakes. And they miss the opportunity to connect those financial numbers to what's happening on the ground. They don't show their employees how their work affects the bottom line.
So for you, the listener, how can you start implementing those lean metrics? How can you use those to drive real value and make things better?
First, figure out what's important. What are those key metrics, the ones that really show how you're creating value for your customers? Keep them simple, make them visual, focus on those leading indicators, those early warning signals, and use that data to learn, to improve, to get better. Don't use it as a weapon. Make sure everyone understands how their work contributes to those metrics. A hospital, for example, they might track patient wait times, infection rates. Those are key indicators of quality. A manufacturing plant might track their cycle times, their yield. It's about finding the right metrics for your business.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, let's just quickly recap. We've gone through 7 incredibly powerful lean strategies that CEOs use.
Yeah, from going to the Gemba to really seeing where the work happens to getting rid of all that waste, mapping out how you create value, that continuous improvement mindset with Kaizen, putting your people first, having that strong lean leadership, and measuring what really matters. These aren't just theories. These are principles that work. And when you apply them with commitment, discipline, with great leadership, they can transform any organization.
And it's important to remember, right? Lean isn't just a bunch of tools or techniques. It's a shift, a fundamental shift in how you think, how you operate. It's about continuous improvement, respect for your people, and always focusing on delivering that value for the customer.
Yeah, that's so important. And, we encourage you to take these ideas and think about how they apply to your own work, whether you're running a company, leading a team, or even just trying to be more effective in your own work. It's a journey, and every step you take towards these lean principles will make you better.
So here's something to think about. As you reflect on what we've discussed today, which of these 7 strategies do you think could have the biggest impact right now in your own work? And what's that one small step you can take today to start moving in that lean direction?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back with more explorations soon. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into how those top CEOs, how they build, those really exceptional organizations. It's like, how do they get it right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're going deep on how these top performers really make it happen.
Yeah.
Not just like the surface stuff.
Right. This isn't some generic advice. This is the real deal, those core strategies. And, it's fascinating. We dug into a ton of material, like a lot of research. And we found 7 key lean strategies that just stand out, right? Companies that really nail these strategies, they see a huge difference. Think like a 50% drop in lead times, 30% jump in capacity. These are those game-changing results.
Absolutely. This is about more than just tips and tricks, right? It's
Yep.
about those fundamental principles that underpin, world-class performance.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't about, just being good. It's about being exceptional. And in this deep dive, we're going to break it all down. We're going to unpack these 7 critical approaches. 1, going to the Gemba, seeing where the real work actually happens. 2, the relentless pursuit of waste elimination. 3, mapping the value stream, really focusing on what matters to the customer, because at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. 4, igniting continuous improvement with Kaizen. 5, putting people first. Your people are your most valuable asset, period. 6, leading the lean way, the role of the CEO. They're not just a figurehead, they're a steward. And 7, keeping score the lean way, metrics that actually drive value.
That's the lineup, those core principles driving these top organizations.
Exactly. And look, we're not just going to throw concepts at you. We want to give you actionable stuff, right? Real world insights that you can actually use. So whether you're leading a team, whether you're just trying to get your own work flowing better, or you're just fascinated by, what makes these great companies tick, you're in the right place.
Let's kick things off with that first strategy, going to the Gemba.
Okay, so Gemba. It sounds a little fancy, maybe even a little mysterious, but honestly, it's a very grounded idea. It's just, the actual place where the work gets done. Think of software developers, their workspace, or, a nurse's station, or the shop floor of a manufacturing plant, wherever the real value creation happens. And, what really separates lean CEOs, they don't just sit in their offices looking at reports. They make it a priority to go